Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Adam Kligfeld's weekly Rashi study class.
We are, I believe, finally out of bridegrooms of blood. We essentially finished the scene with Tzipporah and Moshe and a circumcision, and the different way of understanding Chatan Damim Atali and then Chatan Damim Lamulot. I don't remember if we finished the last Rashi on that. I know we were comparing how different commentators dealt with even the word blood in the two verses, because some are reading the blood as referring to the blood of Moshe that was threatened to be shed, and some are reading blood to be the blood of the circumcision. And we went down that rabbit hole a little bit, and I don't remember if when we emerged from it, we finished the last Rashi on verse 26. Does anyone have a note on that if we actually finished that Rashi? I know we started it, remember we did the Vayirif, but did anyone know if we finished it? No one knows? Let's read verse 26. Maybe I'll read the Rashis to get us through a little quickly, and then we'll move forward. Verse 26 is the last verse of chapter 4, by the way, is the last verse of this section. Vayiref mimenu, something like he let him go. So we assume the him is the angel. Who is being let go is also a question. Is it Moshe, who is the one who is being threatened, or is it the child? Az Amra, then she said. The she here is clear. It is Tzipporah. She's the only she in the scene. Chatan damim lamulot. You are a bridegroom of blood with respect to the circumcisions, right? And if we compare the previous phrase, ki chatan damim atali, to chatan damim lamulot, right? What's the difference between saying in the previous verse, you are a bridegroom of blood to me, versus you are a bridegroom of blood for circumcisions? What Rashi says is, let's just read the Rashis quickly. On Vayiref hamalach mimenu, the angel released him. Az hevina, therefore she, Tzipporah, understood, she'al hamila balahargo, that whatever danger was threatening Moshe, it was with respect to the milah, the circumcision that hadn't yet been done, but now was done, meaning the angel's release of Moshe suggests that the threat to Moshe is gone. Then on the next Rashi, Amra chatan damim lamulot, when she said, you are a bridegroom of blood with respect to mulot, chatani haya nirtzach al davar hamilah. Very, very, very kind of terse words. My groom, my chatan, haya nirtzach, was almost murdered, or was liable to be murdered, al dvar hamilah, with respect to the circumcision that had not yet been done. Meaning, chatan damim, you were a bridegroom of blood, meaning not the blood of circumcision. You were almost a bloody bridegroom, meaning you were almost killed. Right? That's the jump. The damim here means your blood was at stake. Why was at stake? Lamulot, with respect to, I don't know why it's plural, the circumcision or circumcisions that had yet to be done. I did it. You're welcome. Now your damim, your blood, is no longer in jeopardy. That's how Rashi reads the chatan damim lamulot, right? The damim here is Moshe's blood, not the blood of circumcision. And then finally, stop me at any point if I'm going too quickly, and maybe we didn't even do this last week, so we will have done this overly quickly. On the word lamulot, right, Rashi first gives his answer on content, and then he goes back and does a little bit of Hebrew precision. You know, he sometimes switches that order. Sometimes he does the Hebrew precision first, and then he gives you the drash. This time he resolved the problem in the verse from his perspective, and then he says, that's a weird word, lamulot, right? It's weird, even if you know a little bit of Hebrew. The verb is lamul, infinitive. But you don't pluralize an infinitive, right? You don't say, you have the verb lichtov, to write. You don't say lichtovim. You don't, an infinitive is unconjugated, right? It's just left as it is, right? So it looks like it begins with the infinitive to circumcise, but mulot looks like a feminine plural, right? In modern Hebrew, if we took the noun milah, which is the gerund of the verb lamul, circumcising, right, or circumcision, the plural of that is milot. But here we have lamulot. So Rashi says on that, al devar hamulot, the lamed reader, even though it looks like it's the beginning of an infinitive because the infinitive of to circumcise is lamul, read the lamed not as to as an infinitive, but al or al davar. Shem davarhu. It is a thing. The mulot is a noun, not a verb form. The halamed, the lamed at the beginning of the word, which is pretending to be, as it were, the beginning of a circumcision, of an infinitive, meshameshet bilashon al, is serving the meaning of the word al, meaning with respect to. I just lost my place. Kamo, just like the Amar Paro Livnei Israel. Let me share my screen and show you that verse from Parshat B'Shalach. Okay, so in just a few chapters later, just 9 chapters later, which we'll get to in 2024, maybe we can study while we're on the bus in Bahrain, as the synagogue does its Abraham Accords trip, which I hope you'll join us for. We have the beginning of Parshat B'Shalach. If you go to the context, by Deber Moshe more, God said to Moses, saying, Deber b'nei Israel, speak to the children of Israel, v'yashuvu, they should turn back, v'yachanu lifnei piach hirot, they should make their encampment in front of this place called Piach Hirot, bein Migdol levein Hayam, between Migdol and Yam, lifnei Baal Tzafon, in front of Baal Tzafon, nechachot tachanu al Hayam, they should encamp facing it towards the sea. V'amar Paro livnei Israel, and Pharaoh said to the children of Israel, Nevuchim heim ba'aretz, they are confused in the land. See how I translated that intentionally incorrectly as to? Pharaoh wasn't speaking to them, right? They're not with Pharaoh. They're with God. And Pharaoh is trying to strategize and plot. And the Torah says, Livnei Israel. What it really means is regarding the people of it, the children of Israel. Here it's translated as of the children of Israel, that they're locked in. I'm gonna go get them. Okay. So Rashi says, just like here, the lamed is Livnei Israel, and it's more obvious because here, this lamed in Livnei Israel does not look like an infinitive. It's not like a lamed pretending to be infinitive. It's a lamed with as a preposition, like a stem cell preposition, where it can mean lots of different things. I mean, on, to, with respect to. That's the same as the lamed of lamulot. You had been, Moshe, almost a bloody bridegroom because of the circumcisions that had not been done. That's Rashi on this verse, and that kind of brings a close to the three or four verse episode that we've been lingering on for a long time. Rick, and then Barry.
Hi. I wanted to ask about, actually, Leonard, if there was...
Now I can hear you.
Now?
Yeah.
Okay, hi.
Hi.
The lamulot, the vav isn't there for the plural, which is kind of common, but I wanted to ask Leonard, I know what Rashi said, but is there any kind of other word, mulet? Is there any kind of other way to read that besides a plural? Because like the vav isn't there. That's all.
You mean the second vav of mulot?
Yes, that it's missing, so maybe it's not really mulot. It could be some other word, mem, lamed, tet, ataf. Is there any other root? Probably not.
My response is why? Like, what are you searching for?
Just a different translation, because we were having a hard time. It doesn't look like the usual infinitive and all that kind of thing. So maybe just exploring if it's a different word, if there's a different root there.
Yeah. Listen, anything is always possible. It is the only place in the scene where the root milah comes up, right? We clearly what's happening in verse 25 is a is a milah because it's vatichot et orlat bana, that she cut off the foreskin of her son, but the root isn't used. So it's not like there is a 100% obvious understanding that la mulot is from milah, but I would say it's 99.79% that's what it refers to. But in a midrashic realm, anything is possible. Barry?
So I'm confused.
Okay.
I think the story was there was only one circumcision that took place, but we have plural circumcisions and plural bloods. How did one become more than one?
Yeah, so blood is a word like pants in English, where it's often like, and scissors, where the word appears in plural. Damim is a way of referring to blood as a singular concept, right? And if you think about it, what blood is, right? What is a blood? Is it a blood cell? So even in English, the singular word blood refers to lots of blood. In Hebrew, the plural word damim refers to the notion of blood. So that was the easier one. Why the mulot is plural, we don't know, right? It does seem to be there's only one episode of cutting here.
But I think I heard you refer us to the word circumcisions.
I did, because mulot is plural.
Yes.
But then but it was a kind of a nod to what the word looks like in Hebrew, and then I went backwards and said, yeah, we're only aware of one cutting in this particular scene. So Rashi is not perturbed by the plural. He even uses the plural in his explanation, right? He says, al devar hamulot, on the matter of the circumcision. So he actually retains the plural in his commentary, even though there's only one that we're aware of. It's a mystery. Yeah. Anyone have an idea on it?
I have a second question. She threw this at the angel, whatever that is. Is it possible her statement, "You are now a bridegroom of blood to me," refers to the angel, the whatever this being is? And
she's now wedded to the being.
I suggested at previous our meetings that this so-called angel, this being, was something prehistoric, let's say, pre-biblical, pre-Breshit.
And that she's now wedded to the being, that the being is a chatan damim?
It's a threat to that being, that to make it go away. You are now mine.
Also a possibility. In terms of the plurality of mulot, Berry, for those of you who have this chumash, if you look at the one right underneath Rashi on page Nun Gimel, Ibn Ezra Ha'aruch, and look at the bottom of the second paragraph. Mulot shem davar, the word mulot, he takes out the lamed, is a noun. Shem davar, the name of a thing. V'hinei alashon rabim, and why is it in the plural? Ba'avor damim. Since damim is plural, and damim, it's natural for the word damim in Hebrew to be plural, even referring to a single instance of blood. Since damim is plural, mulot is plural, right? So, and the reader will understand that damim is generally used in plural. So he says that the mulot is pulling from the plurality of the blood. Yeah.
Mm.
Anyone else before we leave Tzipora and the flint? Rebecca?
I don't know if what I have to say is a question or a comment, but I'm wondering about the fact that Chatan Damim shows up twice in Kafeh and Kavav, and whether there's the intention is to say that in the first pasuk it's one kind of Chatan Damim, and then in the second one she's saying, "Oh, you're not that kind of Chatan Damim. You're not a dead groom, rather you're a groom of circumcision." So kind of wondering if there's anything said about that sort of balance between.
Yes, so very good. So some of the commentators do say that in the first phrase, she's saying you're at risk. And in the second phrase, she's saying because of the blood of the circumcision, connecting the damim to mulot, not to chatan, you're okay, right? that in the first case, it's the blood of Moshe, and the second sentence is the blood of the circumcision. Rashi is reading specifically against that, but Rashi is just Rashi, right? And the doubling of a phrase that I don't think we ever see anywhere in the Torah, maybe the Tanakh, I don't know. Is it a doubling for emphasis, or is the second a switch from the meaning in the first line? And these verses are the only setting, the only context from which or through which to understand them, right? So it's a bit of a circular reasoning, because we only have a sense of what these words might mean from this scene. It's not like we have parallel scenes elsewhere. And it's odd phrasing, bridegroom of blood, So that's definitely a possibility. Chatan damim atali, you're in jeopardy. You might be a bloody bridegroom. Chatan damim lamalot. You're a bridegroom, damim lamalot, because of the blood. Now you get to be my living bridegroom because of the blood of the circumcisions that I performed while you were off, meditating or something. Great. Joanna?
I'm wondering if Ibn Ezra is making this point connecting to what Rebecca said also, because normally in smichut, when we have two nouns in relationship with each other, wouldn't we take whether or not singular or plural follows based on the first noun, right? Beit Sefer or Batei Sefer, it would follow Batei, if the first noun is singular or plural, it would follow that. So in a way, is Ibn Ezra almost saying here, this is an exception to the normal grammar one would expect to find. And then Rebecca's pointing out also of the double appearance of Chatan Damim works nicely.
Don't think I'm understanding it, Joanna. Should
it, in the phrase Chatan Damim, right? If I just took it out of Tanakh and wanted to use that in a Hebrew sentence, because Chatan is singular, wouldn't it follow that any verbs or adjectives or describers that follow about the Chatan Damim would be singular? But in
Correct.
This case, we have the plural.
The plural being lamulot? Right. Yeah. So what Joanna's saying is, in a smichut phrase, a two-noun phrase, whether it's batei sefer, houses of a book, which is now a plural noun. So if you wanted to say, big schools, it would be batei sefer gedolim. Or it's the opposite. You have chatan damim. You have a singular noun modified by a plural noun, right? A bridegroom of bloods, and you want to say a big bridegroom of blood, chatan damim gadol. The fact that in between the smichut chatan damim and the word lamulot you have a preposition, it nullifies all of that, right? So if we were going to say say this in English, if we were going to say the preposition for lamulot means that the word mulot is no longer modifying grammatically chatan damim. It's been led there through a preposition, and in which case, whatever is on the other side of the preposition no longer is obligated to follow the singularity or the plurality of the beginning of the smichut. It still doesn't give us a great explanation. I mean, and I don't think that's what Ibn Ezra is saying. I don't think that Ibn Ezra is saying grammatically that mulot is modifying damim. I think he's saying, and I could be wrong, stylistically, since we already have a word damim in the verse that is plural, even though it references a singular, mulot also. And I would say to Ibn Ezra, humbly, not a great explanation. And not a great explanation for the very reason you're bringing up, because mulot isn't modifying damim, or it's being modified via a preposition. And that's a very nerdy grammatical response I just gave, but a preposition does something that breaks up the relationship between the word and the word being modified. Great. Okay. Here's where we are. We're a very interesting place. If I wanted to be glib about it, I would say Rashi is exhausted by this scene and confused by it because he goes to sleep for 5 verses. And I don't think, maybe in a genealogy we once read, I don't think it's been a long time since we came to a 5-verse stretch where Rashi says nothing. But if you just look quickly, the next commentary of Rashi is chapter 5, verse 1, which means the last 5 verses of the 4th chapter of Exodus Shemot, which also happen to be the last 5 verses of the 6th Aliyah of Parshat Shemot. Rashi is quiet. Verse 27, 28, 29, 30, 31. So what we get to do, as slowly or as quickly we like, is just learn Pshat together, because Rashi is not going to give us any expansion. But there's plenty of stuff for us to explore. Okay? So do I have everyone's blessing to move on to verse 27? Okay. Renee, do you want to read verse 27? Vayomer Adonai?
ויאמר אדוני אל אהרון לקראת משה המדברה, וילך ויפגשהו בהר האלוהים וישק לו.
Vayishak, it's a shin, like nishika, kiss.
וישק לו. God said to Aaron, go and meet Moses in the wilderness. So he went and he met on the mountain of God, and he kissed him.
Great, right? So pretty, there are a lot of emotional reunions in the Torah. Yaakov and Esav, will be the reunion at the end of Parshat, at the beginning of Parshat Yitro, where Moshe comes back from the Exodus. Here we got the 2 brothers meeting each other on God's command, right? We'll drill down a little precisely on Hamidbara, that it's, even though we know what it means, it's not in the wilderness, but the hay at the end of Hamidbar means towards the wilderness. So it's as if Hamidbara is coming off of Lech, right? It's almost like Lech Hamidbara. God said to Aaron, go towards the wilderness, likrat Moshe, right? Rather than meeting him in the wilderness, it's the same meaning, but grammatically, go to greet Moshe towards the wilderness. He went. Vayivkeshehu, he pagashed him, he encountered him. Bahar Elohim, mountain of God. Vayishak lo. That word Vayishak, we've seen this before when there's a 3-letter root that begins with a nun. The nun falls out in certain forms, including the Vav Hayipuch. And so Vayishak is from the root nashak, which means to kiss. And the way you know that is, you see that there's a dagesh in that, there's a dagesh both in the yud and both in the shin. I actually forgot which of those dageshes. One of those dageshes is because of the form, and one of those dageshes says, hey, there used to be a nun here. I just forget which one it is. Great. Let's throw some questions at this verse. Barry.
So maybe it's my memory, but I don't recall Aaron having any contact with Moshe in their lives until now. God spoke to Moshe about Aaron and what their connection will be, but from the time of his birth and be taken care of by his sister and his mom, I don't see Aaron having any connection to Moshe until now. Now he finds Moshe and kisses him.
So, assuming that's true, and I think you might be right. I haven't checked that, but I think you might be right. Assuming that's true, give me a therefore. So, what do you make of the scene, given the fact that this Vayivkeshehu and he met him might be a biblical version of and he met him, he encountered him for the first time? What comes up for you about that?
Well, it begins with God telling Aaron to go meet Moshe. Well, who's Moshe? Oh, that's right. I have a brother. Oh, yes. There's no background in here. But God's all of a sudden telling Aaron to go meet somebody you've never known before. It's sort of as far as the story goes.
Great, Barry. That question is a wonderful example of what it means to assume, to study a verse of Torah, trying to forget what you know about the macro story, right? So, because in the macro story, we know that Aaron and Moshe are brothers, and they're going to be encountering each other so many times with the rest of the Torah. But if we were approaching this for the first time, which we'll never be able to do again, it's interesting insight. I'd never thought about that that Aaron is being asked to greet a brother that we know they are brothers and we know they interact, but we've never seen them interact. Right? That's fascinating. I never thought of that before. Elon?
Yeah, I want to talk about the Hamidbara and why it does not say go to meet him in the wilderness, but heads towards the wilderness. They don't necessarily, heading towards the wilderness does not necessarily mean the same thing as meet him in the wilderness. No different than if somebody said to me, oh, head towards Santa Monica and you'll meet him. To me, that I can meet him on the way towards Santa Monica doesn't necessarily mean in Santa Monica, although at the mountain of God, in this case, it does mean that he went all the way all the way into the wilderness, but that's not clear from the initial statement.
Great. Yeah. So, and as you're giving someone directions, it's a different instruction to meet someone at a place or as you're going towards a place. And you can, if you were Aaron, you could imagine Aaron saying to God, well, what's the meeting point, right? He ends up meeting him at Har Elohim, and maybe someone will ask a question about that. But the instruction is to go in that direction, and somehow Moshe will find you, and you're going to end up at the exact same place, right? I don't know why my mind is going this way. I imagine many of you at some point have read the book The Source, Michener's classic tale about land of Israel. In one of the layers, if you don't know the book, it's basically archaeologists are excavating a tell, right, an archaeological mountain in Israel, and at each of the layers of the historical levels, there are novellas within a novel. I'm not giving anything away from you. The book, it's masterful, and at one of the novellas takes place, 6th, 7th century BCE, and it's kind of a historical fiction that is inspired by the siege of Jerusalem, for which Chizkiyahu built the tunnel that some of you have sloshed through, so it allowed the people who were being besieged to access water while they were being besieged. And there's an engineer, a 6th, 7th century BC engineer who figures out how to build a tunnel from there to there using like angles and mirrors hundreds of meters away, and have them meet underground. And if the direction of the tunnel, were off by 1/8 of a degree, they'd be very far away from each other by the time they met each other under the mountain, right? Modern technology, it's simple. 7th century BC, it's pretty unbelievable that it could be done. So my mind thinks about it when I think about the scene where God is saying to Aaron, go that direction, right? It has to be very, very precise direction for him to meet Moshe, if Moshe is being told to go in the, from the other place in that direction, and somehow they meet at Har Elohim. So God gives, only God can give such broad GPS directions and have the two people actually meet, as it were, like the two ends of that tunnel in the book. Tova.
I think one of the things that strikes me with this, as we've seen chapters and enormous detail and motion about Moshe's encounter with God, we have, again in my memory, Aaron's first encounter with God, and all we get is God told Aaron to go into the desert, and as you've just laid out, in this seemingly imprecise way, and Aaron went. And we don't get any of that same sense of what that encounter must have been for Aaron, whether that's because of a difference in personality between Aaron and Moshe, or just because it's not Aaron's story and that's not, the intent of what's being told. But I just find it really striking, that contrast.
Yeah, great, Tova. Joanna?
So the other thing I'm struck by is also the reference in this pasuk to Har HaElokim. Is this not the first time we're encountering that? My assumption is that it's a reference to Sinai, but do we know that?
Yeah.
And playing off a little bit of what Barry said, the moment we read the words Vayishaklo, I was back in the Yaakov and Esav story and all the midrashim that are there about what kind of kiss was that, and is this really a loving scene or not quite so tender as, a first read would indicate.
Yeah, great. So Joanna's the first person to ask, I think, one of the more obvious questions on the verse, which is, what is Har Elohim? Barry exposed to us that we think we know that Aaron and Moshe, we know the story, so we shouldn't be that surprised that they're meeting each other, except this is the first time. we're going to know a whole lot about a place that we might call Elohim, but we don't know it yet in the story. And the way that verse is written, if this is written in such a way that the reader is supposed to understand the references, there's a good question. What is Har Elohim, and why are we being told about it? So we might project that it's the place that we're going to eventually know as Har Elohim, which is Sinai, but not yet. Look what Onkelos does here. Onkelos is kind of troubled by the same thing, or maybe he's not troubled. He just is certain about what it means. Amar Haron, God said to Aaron, Azel lekadmut Moshe, go and greet Moshe lemidbara in the wilderness. Va'azal va'are, he went and he met him betura, on the mountain. Tur is a mountain in Aramaic. Di'itgalei Alohi Yikara Daronai, the mountain on which God had revealed, not will reveal, had revealed God's self to him. So according to Onkelos, where is this? What's Har Elohim according to Onkelos? Anyone?
Burning bush.
Burning bush, right? When we meet the burning bush, we don't think of it as a har. We think of it as just, somewhere out there, depending if your image is from the text or the image is Cecil B. DeMille. We don't necessarily think of it as being on top of a mountain, although there are midrashic texts that suggest that the burning bush was on or near Mount Sinai. But according to Onkelos, his translation is, what's Har Elohim? The mountain upon which God revealed God's self to Moshe, right? So it doesn't push us forward to Sinai necessarily, but rather backward to burning bush. And the fact that he has to do that suggests that, again, as a translator, he's saying, my readers, as they're reading these words for the plainest meaning, this is what they should be thinking about, that this is the mountain already designated as God's mountain because revelation happened there. Great. Rebecca, and then Alan, then Larry Diane.
I have two comments. One is with respect to what Barry said about Aaron and the meeting. And I remember that in Pasuk Yudalid, God actually tells Moshe that Aharon is going to come out and he's going to be happy to see you. So somehow Moshe knows that Aaron expects him. So there must have been some kind of contact between them.
Bring us back to that verse. What verse, Rebecca, were you looking at?
I think it's Yudalid.
Yudalid?
Yudalid, yeah. When he says that Aaron will be able to speak for him, and he's actually says he's coming out towards you, and he's happy to see you, or
right, wonderful.
He will be happy to see you. So
if everybody looks back at that verse 14, which is now months ago, I remember our discussing that the Hinehu Yotzei Likratecha, how, I forgot if it was just in our own reading of the verse or if it was through something that Rashi said, that the verb is present tense, not that Aaron's going to come out and meet you, that he's on his way. Aaron's already on his way to meet you, and he's going to be happy to see you. So if you could read that back into our verse, it's almost as if we read the Yotzei Likratecha in verse 14 as an actual present tense, it's almost as if our verse 27, is going back in time to the time when God had said to Aaron, now go and meet Moshe, right? Or the Yotzei Likratecha back in our verse is like a going, like he's going to go. It's like a present tense verb that means something's going to happen in the future. He's going to be meeting you, and he'll be happy to see you. In our verse is when he's given the instruction, and the Vera'acha besamach belibo, back in verse 14, shed some interesting light on Joanna's comment about how we should be understanding the Vayishak Lo in our verse. Is this, as you said, Joanna, the tender kiss of long-lost brothers, which is what the text is priming us to think, because God says Aaron's going to be happy to see you, or is every kiss very close to a bite, right? Nashach and nashak. And as Joanna referenced the Jacob and Esau kiss from chapters ago. Alan?
Wait, I had one more thing to say. So with now adding the tenses in, this would explain why they actually meet near the burning bush, which is closer to where I guess Moses is. But I wanted to add a comment about the vague instructions, which I interpret more as there being like a main road, like the Silk Road in the east, or there probably were paths or roads that were used both for cattle and maybe just for travel. And so maybe it's not that surprising that they actually met because they weren't really wandering through the desert, but on the main path or road that people traveled on.
Great. And I want to linger on something that Joanna just put in the text, because I also had forgotten that. If you look back to chapter 3, verse 1, it's amazing what you can remember, and it's amazing what you can forget, no matter how many times you read it. In chapter 3, verse 1, which is the beginning of the extended burning bush scene that we just recently finished, Moshe haya ro'eh et son Yitro, Moshe was shepherding the sheep of his father-in-law, Kohen Midian, the priest of Midian, vayinhag et chatzon achar hamidbar. He drove the sheep. We spent a long time on this. Achar hamidbar, beyond the wilderness to another wilderness. What does achar mean? Vayavo, and he went el har ha'elohim, to the mountain of God, Chorevach, to Chorev. And on that verse, now coming back to me, we said, what could har Elohim possibly have meant then? In our verse, the one we're dealing with now, a har Elohim could potentially move backwards to the burning bush scene. But in the burning bush scene, what's the context for har Elohim? And Rashi says it's named in that verse for what's going to happen in the future at Sinai. It's actually the same mountain. And Onkelos uses the exact same language. If you look at Onkelos in chapter 3, verse 1, Letura de Itkele Alohi Yikara Adonai, the mountain upon which God reveals God's self or God's glory. So thank you, Joanna. Thank you for reminding us what all of us had forgotten, which is that the exact same words har Elohim appeared. And so the reunion of Aaron and Moshe are going to take place where God meets Moshe the first time. And if we follow the Midrashic through line and Rashi through line, the same place where Revelation is going to happen. Great. Alan?
All of these comments are going to make my question seem very simplistic. They're beautiful insights that I had completely forgotten. And it's just incredible to hear it and to see everything being presaged in this particular way. They lay it out and then do it. I just have there's some words that just struck me that I just don't see, because in verse 24, we read, Vayivgeshehu Adonai, this is the whole thing about, and they met. And that's an unusual word. I don't generally think about Vayivgeshehu, it says Vayivgeshehu Adonai. And yet in verse 27, that we're just doing, verse 27, it talks about Vayivgeshehu Bahar Elohim. All right, so again, you have Vayivgeshehu there in terms of meeting him, but yet one is Har Elohim, one Ha Elohim, and the other is Adonai. And I wonder if there's any possible, it could be random, we know, but it's a question of Har Elohim in terms of revelation. It's interesting that it's God of justice, Elohim being justice rather than of mercy, which would make sense in terms of giving the law. But yet that prior view, that prior section, we talk about the whole encounter that Tzipporah is going through is being with Adonai.
Yeah.
And it's an ultimate quick switch.
Great. And yes, so Har Elohim makes sense as a decreeing God of the mountain. It begs the question why it's Vayivgeshehu Adonai in the previous scene, because that seems to be a pretty severe God seeking Moshe's death, right? You would think that maybe that would be Vayivgeshehu Elohim. By the way, the thing I appreciate most about your comment, Alan, is your pronunciation of the word presage, because I love your pronunciation. I think of the word as presage. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong, but presage actually pronounced it in such a way which actually telegraphs its meaning, right? To be wise ahead of time. So thank you for giving me another way of pronouncing that word. Larry, Diane.
Nothing to add, because the two main points I wanted to make were already dealt with by Joanna and I think by Rebecca. The Har Elohim and just the geography of where he's going and how he's walking. But what strikes me is, and I don't think he's commented on it yet, is just the shift in the story here. I feel like I want to take a razor blade to the text and reorganize it again, a la Thomas Jefferson, but with a different purpose, because this entire encounter that we just finished today, which is completely perplexing to me, can be taken out of the entire narrative, and it flows so much better. Because as has already been mentioned in verse 14, I'm not looking at it now, I think it's 14, God told Moses that Aaron was already on his way. Now, in verse 27, it says that Aaron, that could be taken, God had told Aaron to go. So in other words, even though he's already told Moses previously, your brother's on his way, now the text is telling us, and remember that God told Aaron to go and to meet him. And if you read this in this way and you take out everything we'd done with Yitro and with Sippor and everything else, this is just really the entirety of the rest of the chapter is a nice wrapping up of how we get to Egypt. And maybe that's why Rashi had nothing to say about it, because it's just it flows so well. There's nothing to say.
Yeah. Or there was like a pogrom in the next village while he got to this verse and he had to go, defend the yeshiva.
As you say, everything is possible.
Right. I mean, every once in a while, it's worth it to stretch our imagination and actually image the man Rashi sitting at his desk doing this work. Right. He's not a mythical figure. He's not prehistoric. He existed. There are no questions about the authorship in the same way that there are questions even of Shakespeare, right? He was a guy, a rabbi with a school. He was sitting in some room with a candle and writing this, living in a glass of wine, yes, teaching his daughters how to put on tefillin, as it were. And in early medieval France, where Jews were threatened all the time, and it's really, sometimes it's just important to just imagine what his life was, from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m, what he was doing.
Don't you see him? Don't you see him as being, in a sense, yourself, with his students around him, going verse by verse through the entire Tanakh, and maybe he took a week off and Leonard took his place. So maybe we need to find Leonard's commentary on the rest of this chapter.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say, probably most people know there's a series of 3 books about Rashi's daughters. And I happen to be reading the second one right now, and it really puts a human face on the man. It's fascinating, even if not quite accurate. It's just fascinating to consider him as a historical character.
Yeah. Tova, I thought scholarship was in agreement that there are at least legitimate questions as to whether or not one man named William Shakespeare wrote everything that is attributed to him. No?
Nope.
That's a fully resolved question in scholarship?
In scholarship and academics, I'd say yes. I think the questions about the so-called questions didn't start till the mid-17th century, long after the vast number of contemporaries he had, including all the people in his acting company. Right. I'd be happy to discuss it with you sometime, but yeah, I would say that.
Then I take back the my calumnious insinuation that
that's right.
All in his place.
And yet, some very prominent voices have raised doubts, including.
Indeed, they have, but they were not really academics in the area.
I know, but there's Supreme Court justices among them.
I know, but yes, as we.
But I agree with you. It's all specious. I mean, it's all
specious. Yeah,
mind games.
It's not only specious; it's highly elitist. Because it doesn't start until they begin to be embarrassed by this prominent voice having been a middle-class person. Exactly. He was not a butcher's son, by the way. That's inaccurate.
For when the world opens up again and we can do more things, if you're history lovers and Shakespeare appreciators, I strongly suggest the next time you're anywhere near England to visit the Globe Theatre on the Thames and the Shakespeare Museum. I spent 4 hours there, and I wish I'd spent 10. It's an unbelievable exploration into the life and the times of Shakespeare. And one of my favorite things is you're walking down a spiral staircase, kind of a spiral like walkway, and in an artistic way, it's displaying all of the words and the phrases in use in modern English that can be singly attributed to the invention of Shakespeare. Like how many phrases we use today that Shakespeare essentially created. One of my favorite museum experiences of all time. Okay, but from Shakespeare to Rashi, Joel, and then Rick, and then Norm, and then I want to read a Ramban.
If Rashi is silent, then the least we can do is talk about Shakespeare.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joel.
So the question I had was, why does Aaron have to go all the way from Goshen to down to wherever he's going, which by my atlas is at least 150 miles, only to turn around and go right back to Goshen? So, I mean, is it for Moshe to fill Aaron in on the plan and figure out what their strategies is going to be, or, as Rebecca pointed out from the previous verse, is it to calm Moshe down and make sure that he doesn't have second thoughts, and to encourage him on his own walk there?
Yeah, great questions, and it does make us wonder about how deep to drill down on the question of raw geography here, right? If where Midian is and where the burning bush was is Chorev, where the revelation is going to be, then I don't know. According to Bashalach and Yitro, that's a 40-day journey. According to the way we, a 49-day journey as we think about how long it took them to get from Egypt there. And by the way, in between there is, a Yam Suf, a sea of reeds, right? So the midrashic linkage of the scene in the burning bush in Midian to what's eventually going to be Har Elohim Sinai, it does force us to confront geographic questions that are hard to make sense of, including this relatively minor but still interesting one, Joel, which is why obligate Aaron to go on such a long journey and potentially have to take a boat across the Yam Suf if he's just turning around. I don't have a great answer, but it's a very precise. The question is a precise read. Great, Rick, and then Norm.
That was perfect, Joel. Because I wanted to point out that the trope are just like the trope for Abraham, Lech Lecha. There you had a Lecha. But there it's also Vayomer Adonai El Avram. So here we have Vayomer Adonai El Aharon. That's the same. And then the Tavir Lech is the same in Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha. So the drash there is that it wasn't just Abraham going. It was Sarah and all the souls, all the people that they had converted, right? So it gave them time to teach people how to be Jewish and all this kind of stuff on the journey, right? So Aaron and Moses, I think they were working out the details, because remember the question about whether they were going to fight or not was about their roles. That the one was the priest and the other one not. The Rashi on that verse 14, he won't be angry with you because of the high position of being the priest. Right. So they'll be able to talk about things on the trip. The other thing, last thing, Vayishak Lo, he only kissed Moses. He didn't kiss Zipporah or his nephews. So just wanted to throw that in there.
And who kissed whom, right? Vayishak Lo, yeah. That's what Ramban's going to play with. All we know is that one man kissed one man. And we assume that the man doing the kissing is Aaron, because Aaron is the subject of the previous verbs. But it's not 100% clear. And so the Ramban I wanted to read was related to that. Before we get to Norm, just as we toggle back and forth between Rashi and Shakespeare, and how we have to have a Rashi class trip to Stratford, Ontario, which I'm looking forward to. Stratford upon Avon is also a fascinating place to visit. when I was on sabbatical, by weird coincidence, Noah, who was a junior at Shalhevet at the time, her first semester junior English class was British literature, and we were in Britain. So I took her on little mini field trips as she was studying different things. She was reading Canterbury Tales, and I took her to Canterbury, and she was reading a lot of Shakespeare. So we went to visit Stratford-upon-Avon, and there's another little museum adjacent to the home that was likely Shakespeare's, and in a certain part of the museum, you walked into a room, and there were actors there in Shakespearean costumes, and they were Shakespearean actors. You could basically say to them, "Do this scene," and they would do it. Almost like you're asking that of a machine, but they were people. They had committed so many scenes to memory. I love the speech that King in Henry V that he gives right before the battle. I said, how about the Henry V speech before the battle? And the actor went right into it. It was unbelievable to just basically have like an on-demand Shakespearean scene, and sometimes they were actually acting out together. So on your next trip, you should go there as well. Norm.
I just wanted to address your comment about Rashi's lifetime. During much of his lifetime, relations between the Jews and the non-Jews in his region in northern France were quite good. There were Jews in the titled aristocracy. Jews were not treated poorly generally. Things went south in Germany earlier, partly because Germany generally was chaotic. We call it Germany, and we think of it as one country. But in those days, it was a whole bunch of little tiny principalities, duchies, counties, what have you, and archbishoprics. And things were very chaotic there. But in France, things were relatively stable for a long time. Certainly towards the end of his life, the Crusades start and things go south, even where he is. And I would say to the people who are reading or considering reading Maggie Anton's wonderful trilogy, that she sets that forth pretty clearly, but other sources and the timelines generally tend to back that up. So, but I think part of the reason he doesn't comment here may just be that nobody asked that question. I learned many years ago that mostly Rashi's commentary is answers to the questions he was asked. And sometimes we can easily tell what the question was. Sometimes we can't. And sometimes there's nothing there because nobody asked.
Right. And that in itself is interesting because look how many things we've asked on this verse, right? So It's interesting when we have curiosity about verses that apparently they didn't, or listen, there are lots of possibilities. It could be that he wrote it and the verses were lost. It's still a miracle that all this is extant, right? So is it possible that it was on one little piece of parchment that got swept away by the cleaning lady? I wanted to read one Ramban with you. If you're in the in this book. Oh, I keep forgetting. I can just pull it up on Safari. Give me a second, because not everyone has that book. I forgot to pull this up in advance. Give me 1 second, and probably this will end. What verse are we on? 27, right? Okay. Exodus 4:27. Okay, let me share the screen. Sorry it took so long. Okay, so here's our verse. So Ramban, Nachmanides, Spain, 13th century, 13th or 14th century. Vayishlach lo. He kissed him. Ramban was responding to the question that we kind of played with. Who kissed whom? Aharon nashak leMoshe. Aaron kissed Moshe. And if you're wondering about the lamed there, kiss in Hebrew, at least in biblical Hebrew, is similar to other verbs where in English it's a direct object, no preposition. In Hebrew, the verb comes with a preposition. So to kiss someone in biblical Hebrew is to kiss to someone. The lamed is there. Nashak leMoshe. Ki Moshe ha'anav. Moshe, the humble one. Nahag kavod ba'achiv hagadol. Treated his older brother with great respect. Ulechein lo amar vayishku ish la'achiv. And therefore, the text did not say that each one kissed one another. What do you make of that? In what way is Ramban saying that it's kavod to Aaron that Moshe didn't kiss him, but rather he let Aaron kiss him? What do you like? In what way does that make sense in understanding how deference is doled out? Any thoughts? Norm and then Tova, or Norm, is your still hand up from before? Yeah, Tova.
Well, I think it's generally the notion that the person who takes the initiative is the person to whom the greatest deference is due. If you take the initiative, you are claiming an authority or a prominence. So if you allow, or if Aaron is the one who takes the initiative to kiss, it is paying deference to his role as the elder brother. So I think it's an issue of initiative, of who prompts it.
Yeah.
A generation ago, who introduces who to whom was a major aspect of etiquette that we've kind of lost.
Yeah. We've lost some of that formality, and in some places we've reversed it, because you could imagine if Ramban were writing today, it would be reversed, that to show deference to his older brother, he went towards him and kissed his ring or kissed him. He initiated it, but in a Rambanian world, maybe, this says something about Spanish aristocracy in the 13th century. It was allowing himself to be kissed by Aaron that showed Aaron that Aaron had authority, had seniority, had primacy, even though Moshe is going to become the significant one. And the reason why this is interesting is that, how when we closed Breshit a long time ago, we said, we're finally done with the endless question of firstborn and who's more significant, right? And Ramban is not directly linking to that, but reawakening the fact that even between Aaron and Moshe, there are questions of primogeniture and how that plays out in the story.
It could relate to the notion of not speaking until you're spoken to.
Yeah.
Right.
Great. Tybal and Barry, and then we'll call it a day.
You started where I thought you were going, which is the whole notion, the idea that Moshe, who grew up not just among the Israelites, but also among the Egyptians, and in the Near East, there was the whole, and so that Moshe, aware of how the Israelites kept upending with the younger son, a number of generations, was extra punctilious. That's where I thought you were going. And if I can add something else, I don't know if it's okay to say this kind of thing, but new to this class, this is my second time. But last night I heard JTS's Benjamin Sommer talk about something I'd never heard before, which is the idea that the Torah is really in the beginning only the story of the Levites, and only the Levites were enslaved in Israel, and the other tribes, other 11 tribes, however you count them, depending on sons or grandsons, stayed behind, which also then would explain why the Levites didn't get territory, they got cities. And I'm just saying, never having heard that before, given what some people have said about Aaron seeing Moshe and not seeing it before, it's a very different frame of understanding for thinking about, if this is really only about one family story, not all the Israelites. Anyway, I just thought I'd toss that out there. I don't know if you've ever heard. I mean, of course you probably have, but it was new to me, the whole, it's really only the Levites. The Exodus only applied to the Levites. That's how the numbers work. And the archaeology, etc.
Great, and Benjamin Sommer is one of the movements and the nation's great teachers of biblical text. He is a delight to study with. So if anyone ever has the opportunity to do so in person or online, seek him out. He's actually taught at Beth Am. I think Rabbi Lucas brought him for an adult education. It wasn't a full weekend thing, but I think he's taught at Beth Am. Phenomenal teacher. Barry, you get the last word.
So our discussion was of who kissed who and what initiated that. Going back in chapter 3, God telling Moshe that Aaron was already on his way. God had already instructed Aharon to go meet Moshe. So Moshe is the object of what Aaron's going to do. And so it's Aaron. Aaron's going to go and kiss Moshe, recognizing that that's the object of the action.
Great. So look at how much we all had to say on verses that Rashi was quiet on. When we meet next week, we'll pick up on verse 28 and see if we'll get through all the verses until the next Rashi. We'll go as slow or as quick as people want to.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.